Welcome to Excelsior 32, the online news source for the Excelsior Project from the New York Council of Deliberation.
Very much, illustrious Powell. Our presenter today comes to us with over 35 years of Masonic experience. He's a member of Chicago Masonic Lodge in Pleasant Valley, New York, a past monarch of Tripo Bed Grotto, and currently serves as the immediate past president of the Empire State Grotto Association. He's a member of the Valley of the Hudson. He's also a past commander-in-chief of that, past sovereign prince, and has been awarded the Meritorious Service Award and was coronated in Cleveland, I believe it was a year and a half ago. Having worked for companies such as Ricoh, Kyocera, Panasonic, Xerox, and AT Commercial Security, he is now the Assistant Director of Membership Development, Ancient Accepted Scottish Rite, Northern Masonic Jurisdiction. You can say that sometimes you get to have a career that is your life's calling. It's my pleasure on behalf of the New York COD to introduce Brother Bob Siebold.
Hey, Peter, thank you very much. Good evening, brothers. It's really exciting to be here to be able to present the second half of something that we talked about several months ago. Before I actually get into the presentation, I'd love to go through the 2023 season that we still have left in the Excelsior lineup. So obviously tonight we're going through Everyone Communicates, Few Connect. This is part 2. We're going to be zeroing in on practices. I'm looking forward to the April presentation that plays the thing by a good friend of mine, illustrious James Gregg. He's in the Valley of New York City. James is a terrific guy, and I think you'll find him very engaging. I'm not going to spill the beans on what he does for a living, but let's just say he's got a really interesting job. So I think you're really going to enjoy what Jim has to say. We then have the illustrious Stephen R. Whitaker 33rd degree MSA Leadership Forum, which we're very excited to be presenting. That's going to be Friday, April 14th through Saturday, April 15th. That's going to be live from Syracuse, New York, but there's also going to be an opportunity for you, if you're not a second or third level officer in your valley in New York, you're going to be able to watch that through a live stream. So stay tuned for more of that. I know information is coming out about that. It's going to be a great day. The only sad part is Steve Whitaker unfortunately passed away a few years ago, and I loved him to death. He was a great man. He was a wonderful Mason. And but in his honor, we named the leadership forum after him because he was the one who did it by himself for about 15, 20 years. And he's just a terrific guy. So this is in his honor. And then hopefully Rick and I and presenters can keep it to the level of excellence that he did for sure. So be on the lookout for that. We have the New York Council Deliberation Annual Session. That's going to be Saturday, June the 10th. And that's live from Syracuse, New York. And that always is a great time. I think, you know, in my job, I hear about CODs around the country, and I can't help but compare what they do to what we do here in New York. And brothers, I will tell you, we have one of the finest COD sessions in the Northern Masonic jurisdiction. You got to trust me on that one. So if you haven't thought about that, set aside Saturday, June 10th. You definitely need to be in Syracuse, New York. It's going to be a great time. We're also offering a Rose Croix oratory. That's going to be on Wednesday, August 16th, 2023. And Brother Chuck Dunning Jr. is going to be presenting that piece for us. Chuck has done a terrific job. He's been a guest presenter for us before in the past, and he's just outstanding. So if you've never seen Chuck, you definitely want to tune in on the 16th of August. And then I would call it the big show. We go to Louisville, Kentucky for the 2023 Supreme Council session. That runs from Saturday, August 26th to Tuesday, August 29th. Several men on this call, I believe tonight, are actually receiving their 33rd, and it's a wonderful honor. As Peter said, I was blessed enough and honored enough and quite frankly shocked when I received the 33rd back in Cleveland. And it is, with hands down, it is the premier Masonic event of the year. So if you get to go to that. And by the way, let me put a little footnote in there. You do not have to be a 33rd to go to the Supreme Council session. You can go to everything that everybody else does except for obviously the 33rd degree. So it's a great time. And if you really have never seen Louisville, it's a wonderful place. And I strongly suggest that you go. So we've got a lot going on in the Excelsior program, and we're going to keep you certainly busy. So I had the honor to go represent the Scottish Rite last year down in Florida. Illustrious Mike Morris, our deputy, he sent me down for Maxwell training, and it was one of the best best few days of my life, quite frankly. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about the Maxwell organization. And quite frankly, it made me not only a better individual, but it made me a better public speaker because I learned so much in several of those days. One of the books that really appealed to Rick and I and to Mike was called Everyone Communicates But Few Connect. We thought there was a direct correlation to that and Freemasonry. Let me give you a little insight on this book. So over 2 million copies have been sold to date. It is one of John Maxwell's top bestsellers. It's been printed into 17 different languages. So I can tell you right now with total confidence that somewhere around the world is probably going through a talk or a course based on this book, Everyone Communicates Few Connect, in multiple different languages. It is broken into 2 sections. Part 1 is connecting principles, which we already have gone through. We did that several months ago. And part 2 is connecting practices. And that's really what we're going to focus to tonight. What I'd like to do is I'd like to go through the book summary. And these are some things that not only I feel, but people who've done summaries on the book and just really understand the Maxwell organization have said. So it is the most effective leaders know how to connect with people. So I'm sure all of you, in fact, I'd be hard pressed to think that some of you have not been at either a professional or private or even a fraternal gathering where someone got up to speak and you totally got disconnected from them. Those folks should be reading this book. So I will tell you, if you want to learn how to connect with people while speaking either one-on-one or in a group, this is the book for you. It's not about power or popularity, but about making the people around you feel heard, comfortable, and understood. When I heard that, I had an immediate connection to that. And I felt, man, I said, you know, Maxwell's spot on. He's 100% right. Because when you're delivering a speech, whether it's for one person, 100 or 100,000, it doesn't matter. You want to make every person in the room feel exactly that they're heard, comfortable, and understood. Anyone can learn to communicate in ways that builds powerful connections. And that's absolutely true. We did talk about that in part 1, and I'll go over that a little bit with you. And Everyone Communicates Few Connect. Maxwell shares 5 principles and 5 practices to develop connection skills. It's called Finding Common Ground, keeping your communication simple, and that can be really tough sometimes. Capturing interest, creating an experience everyone enjoys, and staying authentic in all your relationships. So in part 1, what we did was we went through those 5 principles that are foundational, excuse me, for connecting with people. Number 1 is connecting increases your influence in every situation, and that's an absolute fact. If you walk into a room, and I do a lot of speaking for the Northern Masonic jurisdiction, I have the honor of running the ambassador program. And I actually go to valleys. I've never met some of these people, maybe 1 or 2, but there could be 30, 40 people in the room. And I got to connect with every one of them that's in there. So they understand what the program's about, what's being asked of them to do, and how important being an ambassador is. So this number 1 principle of connecting increases your influence is an absolute positive must. Number 2, connecting is all about others. And that's 100% right. A lot of people think when they get up and they deliver a message, it's all about them. It's not. It's really about your audience and how you make them feel. So number 2 is paramountly important. Number 3, connecting goes beyond words. And that's a lot about emotion. It's a lot about how you wear your emotions on the sleeve, how passionate you are. And that is absolutely for sure. You should be, when you get in front of people and you're either teaching or you're delivering a message, you should almost feel tired, all right, because you've been so passionate. You put so much energy in it, and that's the truth. Number 4, connecting always requires energy, and that's 100%. I know that if I'm going to be delivering training or whatever it might be, and I'm going to be in front of a group of people, I always try to take it easy for about the day before, or maybe 45 minutes, an hour before. Drink lots of water, make sure that I'm connected to my material, but I try to get my energy level up so I can give everything to my audience, and that's very important. And then number 5 is connecting is more skill than natural talent. I believe that some people have an inherent natural talent to speak in front of people, but you have to put a lot of work into it. So the true power of connection does not come from superficial interactions with others. Quite frankly, it comes from connecting with people long-term in ongoing relationships so that we can make an impact of real value on. The effectiveness of communication relies more on the character of the messenger than on the content of the message. And that's something I learned when I went down to Florida for Maxwell training, is the character of who you are will come out. No matter how hard you try to hide it, it definitely comes out. And that's even more important than the content of your message. And you also don't have to be a high energy person or an extrovert to connect with people. You must simply be willing to use whatever energy you have to focus on others and reach out to them, because again, it is all about the person in the audience. It's definitely not about you. So let's part away from part one and let's go into part two, which is connecting practices. So now that we reviewed in our first session, connecting principles, let's review part two of our series, which is called connecting practices. And this is actually how it's broken out in the book. So there's 5 areas that Maxwell really focuses to. And I love these because when you put it all together, it's really the blueprint for success when you're going to connect in a speech. You want to connect individually with a group of people. Number 1 is connectors connect on common ground. So in other words, you really understand and create that common ground between you as the presenter, or as the connector, as he calls it, and your audience. Number 2, connectors do the difficult work of keeping it simple. And that can be really tough. I know that in my professional life, when I was in the corporate world and someone was trying to explain a new product to me or a new service, I would literally turn to them and say, explain this to me as if I know nothing about this and I'm 5 years old. All right, break it down so simply that when I walk away from you, I understand exactly what I'm supposed to do, how I'm supposed to interact with this product or service, and I can turn around and I can teach my team or my people, or better yet, go to a customer and be able to talk about this. So keeping it simple is very important. We're going to talk about that tonight. Number 3, connectors create an experience everyone enjoys. So one of the things that I found when I went to the Maxwell workshop is he's very engaging. He's humorous. He can be serious when he has to, but he makes sure that everyone walks out of there at the end of the day and enjoying the Maxwell experience. And it's just like with anything you might do when you speak. So as a connector, you are held responsible for that. Number 4, connectors inspire people. I think that's hugely important. And, you don't have to inspire someone to get the answer to world peace. It can be something as simple as, go out and do this because it's going to make you a better person, or go out and try this because it's going to make the people you interface with have a better view of your organization or you or a project that you're trying to move forward. That's very important. So inspiration is huge. And then number 5 is connectors live what they communicate. So in other words, you have to walk the walk and talk the talk. And we're going to talk a lot about that tonight. So let's take a look at connectors that connect on common ground. What does that mean? Really what we're focusing to here is you want to build on agreement, not disagreement. And the top 4 barriers to finding common ground, and there are 4. So the first one is assumption. Assumption means I already know what others know, feel, and want, and you should never assume. If you remember the old Odd Couple show, I think we're all from that generation where we all remember the Odd Couple TV show with Tony Randall back in the 70s, and it was a great episode where he took the word assumption and broke it down into multiple parts. I won't do that on this call, but I will tell you, if you think about it, that was absolutely right. When you assume, you think you know a lot about that individual or what they want. And you should never assume. That's not good. The second thing is arrogance. I don't need to know what others know, feel, or want. Well, that's a no-no. If you're going to connect on common ground when you're speaking in front of a group, a good connector totally avoids arrogance. They go out of their way to do just the complete opposite. They want to know what people feel. They want to know what they want. They want to know what they're looking for to get out of a discussion or speech, whatever it might be. And then there's indifference. What is indifference? I don't care what others know, feel, or want. Indifference is a form of selfishness. That means that, it's all about me, it's not about you, and that's totally not true. And then obviously is control, all right? I don't want others to know what I know, feel, or want. So in other words, you harbor information, or you only give out enough to get people to the next, not even to the next level, but to make them feel somewhat comfortable, but not enough to make them successful. So what you always want to remember is good leaders and good connectors do not keep people in the dark intentionally. And connecting is a choice and a mindset that truly can be learned. And that's an absolute fact. And if you read the book, which I strongly suggest that you do, you'll understand exactly how Maxwell teaches you how to do that. Connectors also connect on common ground. They search for common ground and build on it. So if you want to increase your odds of connecting with others, make the following choices every day. So let's go through these. Number 1 is availability. I will choose to spend time with others. So one of the things, for instance, I do when I go out and I teach the ambassador course is I always say to my group, first thing is I want you to know that this course is not in learning and development, what we call a dump and run, which means that you're going to come to this course, you're going to spend a half a day with me, and you're never going to see me again. I go to the complete opposite. What I say to them is, hey, listen, I'm available to you to help you with an ambassador program. If you want to strategically get together with me and talk about, hey, how do I go out and build new membership for my Valley? How do I go to my Blue Lodge? How do I use the presentation you've given me? Can you help me with that? Can you even come and maybe level set and level set a best practice and help us with a presentation? I always say yes, 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 and yes, because I feel that not only should I be delivering the content of the ambassador curriculum, but I should also be available to our brothers. And that's across the whole entire Northern Masonic jurisdiction. And it's exciting when you do that because there's a definite connection there. The second is listening. I will listen my way to common ground. And that's a direct quote right from Maxwell. I will listen my way to common ground. So, you know, my grandmother used to tell me when I was a little kid, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth and you don't listen enough. I actually took a course about 15 years ago. I took a course on listening, and it was probably one of the best courses I ever took because I don't think enough of us really listen intelligently. So you have to listen to what people are feeding back to you as far as what they're looking for and how you can really make an impact in their life. And then there's questions. I'll be interested enough in others to ask questions, not only of them, but of myself. All right. I will tell you again, in my travels in the Northern Masonic jurisdiction, I have people ask me questions all the time. Well, what about this and what about that? And I'm an open book and I will always answer those questions. And I'm also not afraid if someone asks me a question to say, you know what, I don't know, or that's out of my pay grade, but here's a person who can assist you. So that's very important, but you want to have interest when people ask questions. That's huge. The next one is humility. I will think of myself less so I can think of others more. So again, I think that's very important, putting your audience first, putting the people that you're trying to connect to first, because again, and I'll say this over and over and over again, I come from a servant attitude where it's very important that we put our folks first, and especially when we're delivering a speech. I will tell you, one of the best books I read was called Leaders Eat Last. It's a book by a gentleman, his name is Simon Sinek. If you've not read that book, you should. It's a great book. He interviewed the Commandant of the United States Marines, and he asked them why the Marines were one of the fiercest fighting forces in the world. And his response, quite frankly, was, well, it's because leaders eat last. And Sinek stood back and he said, what does that mean? He said, the men are the most important, not the officers, the men, because they do all the heavy lifting. They do the bleeding. They do the dying. They're the ones on the front line. The officers, sometimes are with them, sometimes they're not, but they're kind of in the background. So he said, it's the men who get the hot food. It's the men who get the best clothes. They get the dry clothes if it's raining. They're the ones that get the warmer clothes. And quite frankly, when it comes to being on the chow line, if the men eat and they eat everything and there's a box of crackers, well, you know what? We'll split the crackers and we'll make do. So I love that when I read that book. So that's all about humility, is thinking less of yourself so you can think more of others. And that's huge. And we should be doing that, quite frankly, in Freemasonry when we embrace a leadership position. It's all about the men in the lodge. It's all about the project that we're running and the people that are reporting up to us to make sure that the the project is important. So humility is big. Adaptability. I will move from my world to theirs. So in other words, sometimes, and we've seen this with people who don't connect well with groups, they come in with a certain type of presence. They come in from a world that doesn't really connect well with their audience. So a really good connector will do the complete opposite. What they'll do is they'll move from their world to the world of the audience that they're delivering a message to. So there's, again, that connection. That's huge. I'll give you a good book reference that you should take a look at. It's called How to Talk So People Will Listen. It's written by a gentleman by the name of Stephen Brown. I've read that book. It's a terrific book. He says in that book, if you want to impact others, don't talk about your successes, talk about your failures. That humanizes you dramatically, but you can also turn around and say, you know what? Failure is how I became the person I am today. When I have adult children now, my twin boys are 24, my daughter's 28, and my new son-in-law is 27. And I said to my son-in-law the other day, he's having a little bit of a tough time or something. And I said to him, I've gotten further in life from the things that were failures versus the things that were successes. The successes are great, but the failures taught me not to do something again and how to be better. So I think that's huge. Stephen Brown also says humility teaches two things: a capacity for self-criticism and allowing others to shine, affirming others, empowering and enabling others. He says that's where humility comes from. So Rick Warren, who I love too, he's a great author. If you ever got a chance to read a Rick Warren book, you should. He says the great thing about humility is it allows us to admit our weaknesses, and it shows us how to be patient with others' weaknesses, be open to correction, and it also helps point ourselves to the spotlight of others and not the spotlight on ourselves. So these are all really important things that connectors do to connect on common ground. And if you really look hard at these five, I think you'll see make a big difference in the way you go about things. So connectors do the difficult work of keeping it simple. I know we've all probably heard that KISS analogy: keep it short, stupid. Kind of a rough way to think about it, but you know, everyone has heard that. So communicators take something complicated and they make it simple. Very translucent to what I said earlier about when I was in my corporate life, and I would say to somebody, teach this to me or explain this to me as if I knew nothing about it, and I'm a 5-year-old, so I can clearly communicate what it is. So to connect by keeping things simple, all you need to do is the following 5 things. And I love the way Maxwell, puts this all together. He says, talk to people, not above them. All right. And I want you all to think about somebody you probably know in your life, maybe, I hate to say this, maybe even in the fraternity, that when they talk to you, they don't talk to you, they talk above you. All right. Like, you haven't got a really strong IQ. That's not the way to be a good connector. You want to talk to people and respect them. You don't want to talk above them. When you talk, you want to get right to the point. All right. Fluff is fine, but people really want to get to the point. All right. In a conversation. One of the things that I always say to folks is when I'm having a meeting or whatever it is, I always say to them at the end, I want to thank you for sharing your most precious commodity with me today, and that's your time. So I try to be very, very cognizant of time. So when I'm speaking to someone, I try to get right to the point, and that's very important. Number 3 is say it over and over and over again. Maybe you can think of that as redundancy, and that really is what it is, but you can say it over and over again, maybe in different ways, but to get your point across, especially if it's going to help the audience that you're speaking to. You want to say it clearly, and you want to say less. I'm of the ilk that less is more. I think that's very important. So as I want to give you some great quotes, I think, on simplicity. I did some research on this, and I love these quotes. It says, as leaders and communicators, our job is to bring clarity to a subject, not complexity. It does not take nearly as much skill to identify a problem as it does to find a good solution. The measure of a great teacher isn't what he knows, it's what his students know. If he can't explain it simply, we don't understand it enough. And that was Albert Einstein. And there's one of the geniuses of our time. And think of what he's saying, keep it very simple. It takes great effort to make any kind of communication concise, precise, and impacting. And that came from John Maxwell himself. And he's 100% right. To be simple is to be great. That came from Ralph Waldo Emerson. So on getting to the point, here's a couple of things you want to think about. Before speaking to an audience, you want to always ask yourself these 2 questions. What do I want them to know? And quite frankly, when I put this presentation together, I thought about these 2 questions. What did I want you guys to know? And then number 2, what do I want them to do? And we're going to actually have some, what I call action items in this presentation tonight, things I'd really kind of like you to do and think about for sure, especially with the subject matter at hand. Get to the point as soon as you establish a connection with people. People are persuaded not by what we say, but by what they understand. Let me say that again. People are persuaded not by what we say, but by what they understand. All right. And that's hugely important. So your words are not as important as what the listener or your audience really understands of what you're trying to say. There's a book that's like everybody in Lexington, in the Northern Masonic jurisdiction, I think from the Sovereign Grand Commander down, is reading this book. I actually picked it up at Christmas time. It's a great read. It's called Smart Brevity, The Power of Saying More with Less. It's a terrific book. If you've not read it, you really should. These gentlemen have really narrowed down how you can say more by saying less. And it's a great book. So Smart Brevity, you want to check that out. Okay. Connectors create an experience everyone enjoys. Now, who doesn't want to go listen to someone speak or be at a Masonic function and not enjoy what the keynote speaker is about to say. So how to be interesting to others when communicating. And this is huge, all right? So a common trait, quite frankly, and one of the things Maxwell talks about, and he's 1,000% right to the power of pod, is a common trait of poor communicators is, quite frankly, being boring, all right? How many of you have sat in a meeting, whether in your professional life, whatever it might be, and listen to someone who just yammers on and on and on, and quite frankly, they're so boring, you like to throw yourself in front of a bus. I mean, it's horrible. So being interesting is a skill that can be learned, quite frankly. So you want to start the discipline of collecting quotes, stories, and illustrations for your speaking. One of the things that I like to do is I like to listen to podcasts. All right, especially when I do a lot of driving. I love to listen to podcasts. I like to listen to speeches. I like to listen to how other people captivate an audience. It helps me be better at my job, quite frankly. So you want to start that discipline of collecting or getting yourself involved and listening to it from either from someone who you really enjoy, whether it's on a podcast or whatever it might be, books on tape, whatever. But you really certainly want to do that. So the way to do that and create that experience that everyone enjoys is take responsibility for your listeners. You want to be responsible to your audience. You want your listeners to really have a great time when they're speaking to you, when you're speaking to them. You want to communicate in their world. So if I'm going to go speak to a group of potential ambassadors, I'm going to make sure that my talk track focuses to exactly what their job description is, what we're expecting from them, what their accountability factors are, and how I'm going to empower them, hopefully, in 2.5 hours with some really good advice, if you will, some training that's going to make that job of being a lodge ambassador be able to attract men into the Scottish Rite a lot faster. So that's huge. Number 3, capture people's attention from the start. I think that's so important. All right. When I start a training, one of the first things I do after I go through an agenda is I go around the room and I ask three questions. Give us your name, tell us how long you've been in your Scottish Rite Valley, where you're from, and give me one interesting fact about yourself. All right. And I'll tell you, the reason I do that is because it's amazing what you find out what people have done. All right. It's amazing how long people have been in the fraternity in our world. It's amazing what they've done in Freemasonry. And when you hear some of these unique facts about themselves, it's pretty amazing. I remember I was teaching a corporate class about 15 years ago, and I asked the same 3 questions in my corporate world as well. And when he went around, he was the last person in my class. It was a sales class. And when he got to his interesting fact, I thought this was really neat. In the summer of 1978 or 79, he was the backup drummer for Deep Purple. And something happened with the drummer's hand, he told us, and he toured all around the United States as the drummer for Deep Purple, which was a band I liked when I was a teenager. Still like their music, but I thought that was like the coolest thing. So he and I had a talk about that. And he told me what it was like to be on the road with a very popular rock band at the time, and pretty amazing, and how he kept in touch with all these guys. And he did some studio albums and everything else, and just really had an amazing life when he was much younger. So I thought that was pretty neat. You want to activate your audience, get them involved. Very similar to what I just said. Say it so it sticks. So in other words, if I'm asking you to do something, it's a call to action, or I'm giving you some type of advice, or I'm nudging you in a specific way, say it so people understand that it's important and it's something they should be doing. I like to be visual, and I love that Maxwell feels the same way. Being visual is very, very important. So, if you sat with some training with me, there's a lot of pictures. I put a lot of pictures in PowerPoint because there's always that death by PowerPoint. Nobody wants that. So you want to be visual. You want to show pictures. And then number 7, I think, is hugely important, and that's telling stories. All right. If you think about the way we're wired as human beings, we love stories. Let's really wind the clock back when we were children. One of the things I used to love was when my mother and father would read to me at night. All right. And I remember when my children were very little, and I'd work a long day. I used to work in New Jersey a lot, and I'd live up here in the Hudson Valley, and I'd make sure I'd come home before I even ate dinner. My wife would give the kids a bath, and then it was my job to sit and read several books until the kids fell asleep. And I thought that was great. And my kids still talk about it. but we all like to hear stories, and we like to hear not only stories from a book, but we also like to hear stories of we've done in our life as it relates to the subject matter. So that's paramountly important. So connectors also create that experience everyone enjoys. There's more to this. There's ideas for capturing attention. So again, what I would suggest is start with a comment about the situation or setting. I was in Portland, Maine a few weeks ago, and the deputy, who was a really great guy, happened to be there. It was a leadership meeting I was at, and I was one of the speakers in this COD leadership meeting up in Maine. And I looked at the deputy and I said, sure, you couldn't start this meeting in June when it's 85 degrees out. The day I was there, but of course everybody laughed. Is your audience involved? That also, you want to ask questions. You want to start with what we call a big win question that will get a lot of responses, such as where people are from. You want to get people moving. You maybe get them up and have them talk to one another and ask people to interact with each other. So generally, some of the things that Maxwell tells us to do is it's the speaker's job to create interest in the listeners, activate the audience, and add value to others. That's big. There's a direct correlation between predictability and impact. So if you're doing all those things that you see up there, start with a comment, relax, begin with humor, create that sense of anticipation, you'll get that predictability and that impact with the audience you're looking for. Another great book reference that I would strongly suggest you check out is the book called The Empowered Communicator by Calvin Miller. He says our brains are programmed more for stories than abstract ideas. And he said you can trace that right back to the caveman, that's for sure. Connecting is not primarily about learning to become a better presenter. It's about becoming the kind of person others want to connect with. So you never want to underestimate the power of connection and the impact it can make. So that's hugely important as well. All right, let's move on. So connectors, inspire people. Everyone wants to be inspired. And what I think is really cool is what Maxwell put together. It's called the inspiration equation. What they know plus what they see plus what they feel equals inspiration. All right. And I love that. And he draws out several different ways to think about that with inspiration. So part one, he says, what people need to know. People need to know you're on their side. All right. When you're giving a speech or you're trying to connect with people, you want to make sure that you're all on the same team. People need to know you understand them. So again, you can make direct correlation to the group. People need to know you're focused on them. That's putting them first and putting yourself second. How inspired are you by people who seem to be concerned only about themselves? All right. How inspired, are you by people who seem to be concerned only about themselves? So again, it's about the people that you're directing the message to. People need to know you have high expectations of them. You want to challenge people inside of a discussion, or when you want to connect with them, you want to level them up to a level of expectation by being inspiring to them and say, hey, you can be better. You can do this. Ask your listeners to do something great. Okay. And it's interesting what Maxwell said to us when he talked about this with us in Florida. He said, if you ask your listeners to do something great, it can be simple as something as holding the door for someone when you leave this auditorium, or buying a cup of coffee for the person standing next to you in the coffee line. It's almost like that whole concept of passing on a good thing. That's important. And I love what he said. He said, people want our encouragement more than our expertise. And that is absolutely positively correct. In part two, it's what people need to see. People need to see your conviction. So they want to make sure that you're as drilled into what you're speaking about as everyone else. That's hugely important. People also need to see your credibility. Now, so again, what we want to make sure is that people see your conviction, people need to see your credibility, and people need to see evidence of your character. That's also very important as well. So it's hugely important that when you get up there, you've got credibility. When you're speaking, you've got conviction. You wear your emotions on your sleeve, and you see evidence of who you are as a human being. That's also very, very important. Let's go on to the next one. There we go. Part three, what people need to feel. So people will not always remember what you said or did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And that's a very well-worn statement, but it's a great statement. So think about that. People will not always remember what you said or did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. I always think about this about college professors, even grade school teachers when I was much younger. And I think about I can't remember the lessons that some of my teachers taught me, but I can always remember how they made me feel and how they also made me want to inspire to be better, all right, than I was. So I think that's hugely important. So never forget that. The second thing is people need to feel your passion for the subject and them, all right? So again, when I'm delivering the ambassador training, I'm very passionate about it. I feel that Scottish Rite has a tremendous value proposition that I think is important for all Freemasons to hear if they're not already a member of our rite. I think that's hugely important. So very, very important that people understand your passion. They understand that for the subject and them. People need to feel your confidence in yourself and them. If you feel confident and that confidence is going to spew all over them, and they're going to know that you want them to be confident as well. And people need to feel your gratitude for them. That's one of the things I always say to when I'm on a call with someone. Again, one of the things I always try to say to them is I appreciate the fact of all you do, or thank you for what you're doing. So critical audience call to action, right? Something I think is important that you guys might want to do. So inspired people take action when you do two things: say the right words at the right time and give people an action plan. So for instance, if you're talking about how to be how to make your lodge grow, all right, one of the things you can turn around and say, here's an action plan for all of you. Here's an action call to action I'd like everybody to do tomorrow. Somebody who's not a member of your lodge, who is not a Freemason, talk about Freemasonry with them. You probably have not done that enough, or maybe to specific people, but you should absolutely do that. One thing I'm asking you to do tonight. So you're giving a call to action. If you want to know more about how to do that, again, another book I've read, it's called Am I Making Myself Clear? It's written by gentleman Terry Felber. Felber says most people's knowledge far outweighs their follow through. Most people do not know how to apply what is being said to their lives. So at the end of the day, he says your job as an influencer in business or in your personal life or when speaking is, he said, your job is to help people move from know-how to do now. And that's huge. I love that. So I think that's also very, very important. All right. We're almost done here, guys, and I appreciate your patience here. Connectors live what they communicate. So after 6 months, Maxwell tells us credibility overrides communication. And I think he's right. Okay. Your credibility is always going to be what people are going to remember. They're going to remember what you said, but that diminishes over time. But the credibility of how you connected with people lives on forever, quite frankly. So again, that's extending yourself. That's making sure that people understand who you are and what you bring to the table. So think about that first bullet. Credibility is currency for leaders and communicators. And I love that too. He said that a lot when I was down in Florida. Maxwell did. Credibility is currency for leaders and communicators. So in other words, if you're trying to communicate a message and you need to communicate it across the United States or from one lodge to the other or one valley to the other, being a credible individual, being a credible human being is that currency for having people to buy in and say, yep, he's an effective communicator. He's a strong leader. I want him here because he's a credible person. Third is effectiveness of communication relies more on the character of the messenger than on the content of the message. Let me read that again. Effectiveness of communication relies more on the character of the messenger than on the content of the message. I love that. All right. So one of the things you learn when you go through Maxwell training is he's all about making you a better person. If you're a good person on Tuesday, you can be a great person on Wednesday. And when you're a great person on Wednesday, you can be a fantastic person on Thursday. He says it's baby steps, but that's what we want to do. We want to make sure that our character is the thing that carries us through life. So I love that communication relies more on the character of the messenger than on the content of the message. And that's huge. And that's what great connectors do. You are the message you communicate to others. So if you say something in front of a group of people and you've got a message that you really want to drive home and you're trying to connect to them, make sure that message is the same on platform as it would be off platform. And that's also very big. If you want to connect well with people, you must become the kind of person you want to connect with. So, you say to yourself, I'm saying these things, but would I listen to me? And also would I want to hang out with me? And would I actually want to follow what I'm saying? And if you can say yes, yes, and yes, well, then you're doing a good job. And that's how connectors live what they communicate. making what you communicate and how you live consistent. So how do you do that? Well, when you connect with yourself, you got to like yourself. You have to be comfortable in your own skin. You got to know yourself, become self-aware, and also you need to know your limitations, quite frankly. You know how to right your wrongs. You can't walk in with baggage. So if you have any mistakes, acknowledge them, or limitations, as I said earlier, maybe even apologize for them and make amends. If you were to ask me to lead let's say, for instance, a talk about or a seminar about accounting, all right, I would probably turn around immediately and tell you I'm the wrong guy for that. Okay, just I'm the wrong person. So, but if someone said, "Hey, I really need you to help me with this," well, then I'd have to say to myself, "What do I need to do to get up to speed on this?" But I'd acknowledge it's kind of a weak area for me, and I'm probably not the right person. So you want to right those wrongs. Be accountable. Challenge yourself every day. How can I be better? That's why I like to listen to those podcasts. I like to listen to books on tape. I like to listen to all those things. So I like to listen to people that are social shakers, people that have made a profound impact on society. And I say to myself, wow, how can I get like that? How can I be more accountable to be a better person? Lead the way you live. Strive to be what you call others to be. So in other words, if I'm saying to you, be a better person tomorrow in small incremental bites, I should be doing the same thing. All right. So walk the walk, talk the talk. Tell the truth. All right. That's just self-explanatory. You never want to get up when you deliver a speech or you're in front of people and you want to connect with them. You don't want to be dishonest. You want to tell the truth all the time. You also want to be vulnerable. And I liked what Maxwell said about this. He says, nobody likes a phony or a know-it-all. Be always honest with yourself. All right. I love that. I think that's hugely important. So again, if you're giving a speech or giving a talk, don't be afraid to say, I don't know, or don't be afraid to say, you know what, let me call in an expert on that. Or this is the person you need to reach out to, or I'll tell you what, after my talk today or after my speech, let you and I get together one-on-one and let's talk that through. So be vulnerable. That's okay. Follow the golden rule. Here's a great quote. And I love this quote. Wisdom is knowing the right path to take. Integrity is actually taking it. Man, that is powerful. All right. Wisdom is knowing the right path to take. Integrity is actually taking it. So you know the golden rule. You know what you have to do. Taking the right path can be really hard, but you can take it. But integrity is actually taking it on your life, and that's huge. And then deliver results. Nothing speaks like results. And you want to communicate every time from experience. And that's certainly one of Maxwell's things that he says. So if I was to give some closing thoughts to this, John Maxwell's definition of success is the following. He says, those who are the closest to me and know me the best love and respect me the most. The true power of connection does not come from superficial interactions with others. It comes from connecting with people long-term in ongoing relationships where we're able to make an impact of real value. And I think that's really important. So, when you get this presentation or you listen to it down the road, think about what John Maxwell says. Here's a man that's spoken just about every country in the world. He's changed people's lives. And he says really that power of connection does not come from the superficial interactions. It really comes from connecting with people over a long term. So this is something that when you're trying to connect, I took away from this that this is a marathon. It's not a race. And it's something that you definitely want to make sure that you work at every day. All right. And in the last presentation, we put together what we call a think tank. And these are some questions that we just put out to the audience. And I would love to get some feedback from all of you guys. Rick, if you
Okay, go ahead, Bob. Most people are still muted.
Oh, that's okay. So there's some questions here, and these think tank questions. And I think number one is, how much healthier would your relationships be if you excelled at connecting? Anybody want to respond to that? How much healthier would your relationships be if you excelled at connecting? Anybody? What do you guys think? Anybody?
I would
Think
say
it's-
I would say quite a bit more.
Okay.
The-
How, Myron? I'm curious. How would it do that for you?
The key to any relationship is trust and having somebody, the other party in a relationship, feel like they are understood and being heard.
Yep.
That's the key to listening as well.
Yep.
And it's a lot easier to agree to disagree on something if you know that the person that you're working with and that you disagree with that per individual at least understands your point of view or what you're getting across. So it's easier to come to a common ground as well if you both understand each other.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm with you on that. One of the things that Maxwell says is if you're at odds with somebody, rather than be angry with them, try to kind of walk in their moccasins, as he says. Get to know why they disagree with you. And sometimes, it can be an epiphany for you because maybe you're incorrect. Maybe you are wrong. All right. But at the flip side, at worst case scenario, at least you'll get to know more about that individual, and it might even lead to a friendship down the road. Who knows? So, but thank you for that. I appreciate it. Let's go to the second one. The ability to connect with others, communicate effectively with them, and increase influence can be learned. Peter Flehan, you think that's true or false? You're a bright guy. What do you think?
I think that obviously it can be learned. Everything can be learned.
Yep, I agree 100%. You can absolutely learn to connect with others. You can learn to communicate effectively and increase influence, and that can absolutely be learned. Is it something you can become an expert overnight with? No, absolutely not. It's something you have to work at. I truly believe that. And Maxwell said, I didn't. He was funny. He goes, I didn't come into the world this, Herculean, phenomenal guest speaker, and everybody starts laughing. He said, I had to work really hard at this. For those of you who don't know, he's a minister. He said, I had to work at it as a minister. And then when I started this business, he said, I was scared out of my mind. He said, I had to work at, what was it going to be like working in the corporate world and everything else. So you absolutely can do that. So thank you, Peter. How do you connect with people that are different from you? We kind of talked about this a couple of questions ago. I'll throw this out. My buddy Praveen, how you doing, brother? How you doing?
I'm good.
How do you think you can connect with people that are different from you?
So actually, this is something I we do a lot. We're from various diverse backgrounds. I think really trying to see things from others' perspectives. Just seeking to understand can be a good. And even though I found some individuals are motivated completely differently than I am. Doesn't mean I'm right and they're wrong, but at least it's understanding where they're coming from.
Yeah.
They're speaking in a different language in a way. So and talking in that language.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that's spot on, man, for 100%. I absolutely do. I think that's the way you do it. So that's one of the things I love about Freemasonry is Freemasonry. When you join a lodge, or you get on a lodge room, you're in a building, whatever it might be. When you walk in, everyone's on the level. Everyone's a brother. And I love that, and if the world acted more like that, I think we'd have a whole lot less problems. I remember my dad saying that when I was a kid. Why is connecting so important when communicating? I think that's a huge piece of this. So let me see. Dave Barnes, you always have good insight. I don't mean to pick on you, but I like what you always have to say. So why is connecting so important when communicating?
Well, from my own experience, I was a teacher for a lot of years, and one of the things that I learned early on is that if you can connect to the kids, you can get them to do anything, and you'll have a much better time in your classroom. Many times I would seek out those kids who had a reputation. I was 11th grade English teacher, and I'd hear about kids coming up through who were hard cases and would give teachers a hard time, and so I'd start working on them before they even got to my classroom. I'd see them in the hall. I'd see them in the cafeteria or something, and I'd try to develop a connection with them so that when they got to my classroom, they already knew me and I knew them, and we didn't have too many problems. Yeah, there were a few kids I had a hard time connecting with, but most of the time, as Maxwell says, if you take an interest in people, if you genuinely take an interest in people, it's amazing how easy it is to connect to them and to get your message across. I think unfortunately in our society today, we're seeing a lot of activity that runs right against this, and that's why we don't get a lot of things accomplished, because we're too busy arguing over our differences instead of figuring out what we can agree on and making those connections.
No, I agree. I remember I went to a managers forum 3 years ago. I'll never forget this. And an HR director, actually she was the vice president, she said, the people in business today want to get paid more, or they want to be appreciated more. And, we all had to write our answer on a piece of paper, and we had to hold it over our head like this. And of course, you had diverse answers in the room, but she said, actually, the answer was, people want to be treated fairly, but they want to be appreciated more. And if they're appreciated more, they don't mind working for less money. But if they're not treated well and they're making crappy money, that's when you have a problem. All right. And she was right. She was absolutely right, because there were some people in the company that I were working for that were doing okay, but not what I would call phenomenal. And there were some people that were making a lot of money that weren't the nicest people in the world. And, it's this dichotomy. And I said, wow, I never forgot that. So it's not the size of your paycheck. Listen, everybody likes a big paycheck. We all can't be paid like Big Peter Flehan when he's like flipping pizzas at 3 a.m, or he's in some cop show on CBS. Sorry, Peter. Sorry, but sorry, we're not worthy, Peter. We're not worthy. Can I have your autograph at the end? That'd be great. But all kidding aside, people just want to be appreciated, and that's an absolute fact. So again, I these are great questions to bring up in an ECM meeting or in your lodge. I would strongly suggest, if I can plug this book, to definitely read this book. It's a great book. If you're not into reading, you can get it on Kindle, listen to it. You can audiobook, whatever you want to do. It is a great book. It's a great study for your valley. It's a great study for your lodge. And I had a great time reading this book. I like Maxwell books. I think very insightful. And certainly this is just the beginning of a lot of these trainings that we're going to be able to bring to you guys. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Hey, Bob,
Yes.
so I put a link in the chat to Amazon for the book, if anybody's interested in getting the book. But there is a question that Myron posted in the chat to everybody, and maybe you'd like to address it. But how do we effectively connect in the digital world?
Oh, well, what do you guys think? I don't want to be the only one speaking here. How do you guys think you communicate or connect rather in the digital world? How do you think you do that? What do you guys think?
Well, I think that we don't effectively connect or communicate in the digital world.
Mhm.
That's one of the issues, and that's where our younger brothers almost exclusively live in, have a disconnect there.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to make a connection because you don't have that in-person, you don't get to know the brother individually. There's a barrier there. It's called a screen, and it's called a veil. So we project only what we want seen. In a way, we do that also in real life, but it's more difficult. And that's why I asked the question: are there techniques that Maxwell proposes for connecting in a digital domain? Even when we're doing something like this with Zoom, how do we effectively? You don't see your audience, you can't see reactions, so you don't know what's going.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because he didn't really talk about that as a I would say a true discussion point, but that was kind of talked about my table, because you follow the same group for the time you're there, and somebody actually brought that up, and this was obviously post-pandemic, which taught us a lot. The pandemic taught us a few things. It taught us that we can be as effective at home as we can in an office. That's number one. And the other thing that the pandemic also taught us is that people need to be around people, and they need that human connection. 100%. Think about it. Your house of worship was closed. Your lodge was closed. When you went into the grocery store, you looked like you were going to hold the place up. It was kind of scary times. You didn't know who was sick, who wasn't. Some people were vaccinated, some people weren't. And I'm not trying to get political on that, but he certainly said that was one of the things that, or somebody at my table, excuse me, said that was one of the good things. If there was a good thing about the pandemic that they learned, but there was a young lady. She was from South Carolina. She at my table, and she said this is how she kind of addressed this question. And I'm not sure if this is really answering your question or not, but she said, I think we have to have a balance between, she called it electronic media. So your phone or Zoom or whatever it might be. And then you have to have that connection to people. One of the things that we enjoy as Scottish Rite Masons is, for instance, of the video degrees. We enjoy Thursday night at the Rite. And believe me, I'm a poster boy for these things. I think they're phenomenal. and they've got great results. They've learned great results. But at the same time, I don't know about you, but I think there's nothing like seeing seeing a Valley degree done live. Seeing guys get the makeup on and the costumes and interacting with each other and being in a lodge room or a Valley room with a bunch of other people, I think it's phenomenal. So I think you have to have balance. My wife always says she wishes not a dollar. She wishes she had a penny for every text message that caused some kind of argument and breakup between two people, because you can never really interpret what a text says. And she's right. We'd probably be multi-billionaires. So, but be that what it may, I agree. Are there any other questions?
Thanks for spending time with XLCR32. The experiences, comments, opinions, and views shared on this program are those of individual Freemasons and do not reflect the official position of any Grand Lodge, Concordant, or Pendant body. Until we meet again, keep on reaching higher.
So it's essential. Communicating is a two-way street. You transmit and you receive, and if you're not connecting, then you can on a screen, and particularly digitally, you can convey information, but that's not really connecting. It's not the two-way street in most cases.
No,
I mean, you can't have a good phone conversation, and you probably had some very good ones and pretty heartful ones over your life as well. But again, the connectivity has got to be two-way. That's the point.
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct. So, well, I think this was a great conversation. Brothers, I thought this was really good. I want to thank.
Thanks for spending time with XLCR32. The experiences, comments, opinions, and views shared on this program are those of individual Freemasons and do not reflect the official position of any Grand Lodge, Concordant, or Pendant body. Until we meet again, keep on reaching higher.